We're going to give you a nice presentation. It'll probably last about an hour on validating product ideas quickly, even without code. Now I'll advance it, Tom.
All right. So I am Tom Evans, as you already know, in Austin, Texas, and I'm going to be the moderator for today's event, which means I'll help facilitate some of the discussion. And also, I will be looking at the questions that you post and making sure we bring those up and get those answered during the webinar. And then happy to introduce my friend and colleague, Kenny Kranseler. Kenny, just say a few words. So
sure, welcome. Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I will be presenting you from Seattle, Washington today. I've been in product management for longer than I care to remember. I've been working for Productside for the last few years, at least. So, welcome everybody, and I'll walk you through some of the slides, including some of my experiences in product management, working with validating product ideas.
All right. Well, let's tell you first a little bit about who we are, Productside. Hopefully, most of you are familiar with it. But at Productside, we know how hard it can be to deliver products people not only use but truly love. Whether it's aligning stakeholders, predicting customer needs, or managing endless backlogs, we've seen it all. We've seen it all. That's why we're here to be your outcome-driven product partner. We don't just provide solutions, we tailor them to your unique challenges. So we want to make sure you get complete solutions that are going to help you transform from the early on education to actually implementing and seeing the results. We recognize that coming in and just giving a training course of one size fits all doesn't work for every organization to meet their unique needs. So we tailor our expertise to help best meet your needs. And then we have a group of invested experts who have extensive experience in product management, who are going to guide you through leveraging their experience in multiple companies to get the best results that you can. So we're thrilled you're here. Let's continue on here, and we're going to say just a few more words before going into the presentation. So the next slide there, please. All right, so we want to make sure that this is an interactive questions, which means you can ask us questions as we go through this. And the very first question that we always get is, can I watch the recording later? And the answer is yes. So after this meeting is over, you will get a link to the recording so that you can go back and review it as much as you need to. Now, during the session, because we want this to be interactive, we encourage you to use the Q&A feature to place your questions. I will be monitoring the Q&A. And so as you put questions in there, I will find the appropriate time to bring those up to discuss with Kenny, and we'll make sure that those get answered. Sometimes we get similar questions, and we may wait and combine some of those together. And also, if you want to go and engage with the rest of the participants in this webinar, you can do that during the chat feature so that you can get to connect with and know some of your other fellow product managers. So let's keep it going.
Hold on. There we go.
Next slide. All right. Finally, we want to take a moment to invite you to connect with us on LinkedIn. Our LinkedIn page is more than just a place to follow us. It's a community. When you join us, you'll get access to leadership best practices that can inspire your growth, conversations about the critical role of product management and tips on making it more impactful, and opportunities to network with other professionals who share your challenges and goals. So you can join us by scanning the QR code and be able to join it right away. So please join us. Love to hear from you and see some of the ideas and thoughts that you would like to share with the rest of the product community. And with that, Kenny, I turn this on over to you, and I will let you be in the foreground and I will be in the background.
Great. Thank you so much, Tom. So welcome to our webinar on validating product ideas rapidly. So today I'm going to try to cover with you some of the challenges with traditional methods of product validations, primarily why they're too slow and too risky, And I'll share with you some techniques you can use to rapidly rapidly test some of the products you have out there, enabling you to make informed product decisions before having to commit significant resources behind it. Hopefully, by the end of this session, you'll have a little better understanding of some of these key validation methods. Things like prototyping, user interviews, AI-assisted validation, and some other low-cost experiments that hopefully will work across your digital products, your non-digital products, and maybe you'll be able to take away some stories that Tom and I will share with you all. So let's start with a poll. So answer which of the listed challenges is your biggest when it comes to quickly and rapidly validating product ideas or concepts? Right. Answers are coming through rapidly.
Yeah. Well, I know, as I work with different companies, I definitely see several of these come up. And not that I want to sway any results of, but that time pressure, lack of time, and maybe that's combined with the stakeholder buy-in is really hard to get.
Yeah, it can be. The one that looks like it's popping up for our group is this one about accessing target users. How do I find the right people to test my concept with? Right. Looks like we got a whole bunch of people in. Should we share some of the results?
Okay. Yeah.
All right. It looks like big one is difficulty targeting users and getting stakeholders to buy in. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we go along with some of these
and that well, I guess lack of time and uncertainty are about the same.
Yeah.
But okay, excellent.
All right. Thank you for sharing with us. And so we'll have a chance to share with you all. So why do we even care about fast validation? Well, too often companies invest months, years into building products that ultimately fail because they never really validated the idea properly, right? Product development, as you all know, it's expensive. There's engineering, there's marketing, there's sales. All these require a whole bunch of investment. So if with fast validation, we can start to answer some of the key questions early, right? Does anybody actually want this? Will people pay for it? Are we even solving the right problem? If we start to validate early, we can save time, we can save money, we can save a whole bunch of effort, right? So even if our early validation test, it's a total flop, we spent minutes and tens of dollars on it, we consider that, an experiment. If we wait until we've spent years and millions of dollars, and you're the product manager on that one, you'll probably be called a disaster. In fact, I would welcome failure in some of these early validation tests. Why? Because we captured some real great learning that we can use to build even a better product. I don't know about you, but I would rather have a failed experiment on my hands that I can quickly iterate from than to have an egg on my face from a complete disaster. So,
yeah, Kenny, I had a client I was working with probably about 3 years ago, and we were doing the training and showed this slide, and the director of that group was like, "Yep, that resembles us." And they were saying, we get an idea that somebody submits, and it gets prioritized. We go build it, and after spending $100,000 or more dollars, we get it ready, and all of a sudden discover nobody needed it or it didn't do what it needs to do. So
I've got lots of skeletons in my closet of areas that we've spent, months or years developing, got it out there and found out nobody really wanted it. And if we'd done just some basic stuff early on, it would have been a much better experience. Let's put it that way. All right. So if we know we need to get to validation quickly and inexpensively, what are some of the problems with some of the traditional methods that you may already be using to try to get information early along? Well, traditional methods are often slow and expensive, and waiting for a full product launch will increase the risk of failure and lead to wasted resources. By the time you launch, the market may have shifted, or you may find that your product doesn't quite meet customer needs. In many instances, I see companies saying, let's talk to our internal product experts. say sales, customer support, or some other subject matter expert to see if the idea resonates with them. Or let's go create an MVP, and by the time they come up with something viable, they spent months developing and millions of dollars of resources. Or sometimes they're embedded assumptions and what they may have, and what they may have done a quick and dirty concept around. They build off that and they find that many of those assumptions were invalid by the time it's ready to launch. So let's explore some of the pitfalls of traditional validation and get to why a faster approach might be valuable. So some of the common pitfalls include things like confirmation bias, false positives. So confirmation bias occurs when we seek out information that confirms our existing beliefs. We want to find ways to prove what we thought was right is right. That'll often lead to misguided decisions, right? Other areas, false positives, gives us a sense of security about our product's viability. Or we test a concept that is intriguing with potential customers and they want more information, but when push comes to shove, some of those same customers are unwilling to pay for what was created.
You highlight something there in terms of that validation pitfall and
Yep.
that big difference between somebody saying, I like it versus, yes, I would be willing to pay for
Pay
it.
for it. Yeah.
And I think, you know, if I look at some of the questions that have been asked of me before, it's like, how do you like my product?
Sounds good to me.
Well, that doesn't mean sounds interesting. Doesn't mean I'm going to pay for it, or
That's
what
right.
you think I need to pay for it.
Yeah, and sometimes so a couple of things around that. One, paying for it, and two is we have some assumptions that we want something to succeed because we think it's a cool idea, and then we go ahead with it, right? So I recount a story of when I was a product manager at Kentucky Fried Chicken. We tested a concept for a skinless fried chicken product that we called Light and Crispy. So we built a product that had the same taste and feel of our extra crispy fried chicken product, but with 30% less fat, 30% less calories, and 30% less cholesterol. Tested off the chart for a new chicken concept. So we went ahead with it. Great idea. We thought we were pretty smart too, so we didn't just stop there. We had a test market. We tested an isolated KFC market in East Lansing, Michigan, right? I don't know if any of you have been to East Lansing, Michigan, but it's the home of Michigan State University and not much else. All right, so many of the KFC customers there were college students. We didn't really eat a lot of fried chicken. So any incremental purchase we got from Light and Crispy, huge impact. We saw 20 to 30% increases when we introduced Light and Crispy, right? But I think there was a little bit of confirmation bias play in there. We got the results we wanted because we picked a market ripe for interest in this product concept. I thank my lucky stars that I didn't just go ahead with it. And I begged our COO to invest in a broader test market. Test in metros like Pittsburgh, Ryan, Baltimore, and Philadelphia. And we tested there before launching national. So in those markets, we barely saw a sales from the new product. We surely would have had a disaster on our hands if we'd launched this concept nationally. Just to show you I'm not kidding, right? Here's the commercial we use for that product.
Your representative in Congress, Ken Calvert, just voted to slash our health care to help pay for
All right, here we go.
KFC introduces a whole new kind of fried chicken, new light and crispy.
Give me no skin, give me all taste.
The taste will get all your attention.
Give me no skin, give me all taste.
New light and crispy from KFC. No skin, so it's light. All taste because it's marinated with 11 herbs and spices.
Give me no skin, give me all taste. Nobody's cooking like Lay's KFC.
All right. So that was our Light and Crispy product.
Kenny, one person asked if you can give any insight on the 11 herbs and spices.
I can't do that. They're secret. Sorry. There is a story for that. Actually, those come in those 11 herbs and spices show up in the restaurant before they put them on, and it's so secret that no company makes that spice mix. There's actually 2 companies that make the spice mix, right? One makes 6 of the herbs and spices, and the other makes the 5 herbs and spices. So you actually get two spice packets in the restaurant, and you put them together, right? So yes, thank you. All right. So what I find is that product teams are often in the mode of build, 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 even before learning from users, right? But validation is not about building first. It's about learning first. Instead of asking, what should we build? We should be asking, what do we need to learn, right? So some basic mindset shifts here, right? Your job isn't to build, it's to test, right? And you don't need a perfect product to start out with, just a good test, right? And the goal is all about learning, not launching, right? Shift your focus from building to learning, right? Validation is about gathering insights, not just creating products. And prioritizing the basics of learning, you can start to make informed decisions before investing heavily in development, right? And this mind shift, right? It allows you to really test your assumptions, allow you to iterate off those quickly based on real customer feedback. And so there are a bunch of rapid validation techniques that you can use to test your ideas quickly and efficiently, right? There's prototype tests such as fake door tests, Wizard of Oz tests, paper mockups. They allow you to gauge interest and start to simulate functionality without building a full product. You can use user interviews where you get real insight through structured conversation, but you must test for more than just interest, as Tom mentioned, right? You got to get to purchase intent. And use trade-off techniques like conjoint analysis to test for some of those concepts. With AI, there's some new validation techniques you can leverage to take advantage of these AI tools to start to simulate user interaction, analyze feedback, start to identify trends. There's a whole bunch of other lower cost techniques, things like landing pages, concierge MVPs, ad campaigns. They can also provide value of data. And we'll dive into each of these techniques in detail. But these techniques share a common trait. They're a set of common traits, right? They're low cost, easy to create and test, and provide insight into how customers might react to the potential solution. These traits make it a little easy for you to build some ideal for early stage validation. So let's talk a little bit about each of these techniques. All right. So prototype techniques, right? They're quick and inexpensive to test ideas, right? Things like fake door tests involve creating a landing page or a button to gauge interest before building the full product. You can use things like Wizard of Oz test. These simulate functionality by having a human perform tasks behind the scenes, giving the illusion that they're getting a fully functional product when really there's a bunch of humans working hard and spending a lot of money behind it. You can also do things like paper mockups. These are simple sketches or prototypes or pieces of wood that help visualize concepts and gather feedback, right? All of these methods allow you to validate ideas without significant investment. Let's talk about one of these, fake door tests. I worked with a company called Gemacare, which most of you probably haven't heard of because they've since gone out of business. But it was a startup that was created by a bunch of students who were at Harvard Business School. And they had an idea. They thought that if they created a subscription hair care line of shampoos and conditioners that was targeted for hair type, you know, whether it's frizzy or straight or blonde or kinky or brunette or whatever it might be, and the climate in whatever area they were targeting, they'd get a whole bunch of people signing up for the subscription. They had no idea on what those formulas were, or the formula of the shampoos were. They just had an idea. They set up a web page, put a little interview up, and asked people to walk through the interview about their hair type and those kind of things, and asked about if they'd be interested in signing up for such a subscription at a price. They got so much interest in people filling out that web form for interviews that they were actually able to raise $5 million from a bunch of venture capitalists. That gave them the ability to actually go and create the formulas, and then they launched the product. It was in market for about 5 or 6 years. Unfortunately, the powers that be and the costs around it didn't allow them to continue, so they're no longer there, but that enabled them to start it. For Wizard of Oz, anybody heard of Zappos, the company that made try before you buy shoes. Their founder, Tony Hsieh, realized there was an opportunity in the market where people weren't buying shoes online. Why? Because they wanted to be able to try them on in their home, walk around with them before they did it. So he had the idea of, well, let's create a try before you buy a shoe product. He didn't set up a whole bunch of e-commerce infrastructure or distribution centers or any of that before he got started. He just put up a quick and dirty purchase page that allowed people to order shoes. And then he had a whole force of folks run around in his home city of Las Vegas buying shoes and sending them out to test that concept before he actually built all the infrastructure for Zappos. Found a whole bunch of people were finally willing to buy shoes at that point. Zappos became, then eventually got bought for, Tom, what was it, $5 billion or something like that by Amazon?
Something significant.
Yeah, so that was the second one.
But
Go ahead.
what was the biggest risk they were trying to test on that one, Kenny?
They were trying to test if the risk there was carrying inventory, right? Setting up and making sure they had all the inventory and the infrastructure around that. He got rid of some of that because he wanted to test if people would actually buy shoes in an e-commerce way with a simple concept of being able to try them on.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
saved all that development and setting up the whole supply chain infrastructure and that kind of stuff until he knew that there was a good idea there.
And the reason I asked that question is they didn't have to test everything about selling shoes. They
Right.
only had to test, would people be willing to buy those online? I still not willing to buy shoes online, but that was part of the risk that they wanted to address. So it was very targeted in terms of what those risks are, and I think that's an important lesson.
I'm a common buyer of shoes online, and I sent a whole bunch back too. So as long as I can try it out in my home, I'm using to it. The one on the right here around paper mock-ups was actually by Palm Pilot, right? And before Palm Pilot became a handheld computing sensation, the founder of Palm Computing, Jeff Hawkins, he was obsessed with creating a truly portable and user-friendly digital assistants, right? Hawkins famously carried around a block of wood, roughly the size of the device he envisioned. He then used paper cutouts to simulate the screen and interface, drawing them and interact with them as if it were a real device, right? And he used that wooden block and paper prototype to sort of test the ergonomics of the device, refine the user interface, the workflow. He gained a whole host of personal understanding how people would interact with that device, right? And he'd use that paper mock-up to simulate how he would use the device in everyday situations. He really did this to sort of understand what the customer use case was, right? Doing it this way allowed him to rapidly iterate on ideas, refine the design, validate the concept before investing significant resources in engineering development, right? While he didn't show this to potential customers in a formal setting, he used it to understand how customers would use the product, right? Great example of simple paper prototype used to validate a market concept. Another technique, as I said, you can conduct structured user interviews as a way to gather actionable insights. You'll ask open-ended questions to encourage detailed responses. Listen carefully to feedback, right? You want to make sure you avoid leading questions that might bias some of those responses. And by understanding users' needs, pain points, and preferences, you can start to make informed decisions about your product. A couple of key things to use when you're using some of these structured interviews: ask open-ended questions, right? Use like, tell me about a time when. Avoid using leading questions. Don't ask, would you like this product? Instead, ask, how do you solve this problem today? And make sure you're focusing more on behaviors and not just opinions, right? What people do is way more important than what they say they would do. So look for some of those kind of constructs. Another technique that's becoming available is there's some tools in AI, right? With this, you can start to simulate user interactions. You can start to analyze feedback quickly, start to identify trends and patterns that you can get to inform your product decisions. Not only speeds up that validation process, but oftentimes can provide deeper insights into user behavior and preferences, right? So if you're simulating user interactions, allows you to you can create almost virtual user personas that interact with your product as real users would. Help you understand how users might navigate and use your product without needing a larger pool of users, right? And these virtual personas can be tailored to represent specific demographics, behaviors, preferences, give you a comprehensive view of potential user interactions, right? And you can use automated behavior analysis to identify common patterns and some of the potential issues in user experience. Allow you to sort of make data-driven improvements, right? And things like, natural language processing, powerful tool for sentiment analysis. It can process a large volume of user feedback, allow you to identify positive, negative, and neutral sentiments, help you understand some of the overall user satisfaction, pinpoint areas for improvement, right? And you can use real-time data processing. Make sure you analyze that feedback as it comes in, allow quick adjustments and iterations, right? Particularly useful if you're doing fast-paced development cycles, right? And you can categorize and organize some of that user feedback into categories, make it easier to find some of the common themes, some of the actions that you need to prioritize. And lastly, you can start to identify trends and patterns through machine learning algorithms, right? Look at that user data, find things that may not be immediately apparent, right? Inform your product decisions, find areas for further explanation, right? You can use predictive analytics to take some of the historical data, use that to forecast future user behavior, future trends, right? Helps you start to anticipate some user needs, stay ahead of what your competitors are doing, and leverage data visualization tools. Look at some of that complex data that might be coming out of these trends and analysis, put it in an understandable format, share it with some of those stakeholders that might not be able to have it, allow you to pick up some key insights, share those again with some of the key stakeholders you have out there.
And Kenny, I think along that idea of identifying trends and patterns is not just identifying new trends, but I think often we as product leaders, or maybe even our executives, get a data point, and it's just one data point of which they're willing to make a decision on, or they make an assumption behind that data. And next thing we know, we're running down a path. And I think this is where we can also use that data to be able to say, I know you saw that, but that isn't really what's happening, and be able to tell the full story on that.
Yeah. So make sure you got lots of data points before you get out there, right? Yeah.
There was one question here in chat, Kenny, about are there some preferred AI user simulation tools? And I'm going to say probably not necessarily preferred, but are there any that you've heard people using that they have found useful?
I don't have any off the top of my head for those, but it's one of those things. Just search and play with them. I'd use multiple ones, right? Because you may not get the right answer off one, but leverage multiple ones. You ever used any, Tom?
No, I haven't yet. So I think maybe this would be an interesting thing as we look at a follow-on blog post or something to
for sure
take a look at that.
Talk some of the techniques.
Be on the lookout for that, because I think that's something that is worthwhile getting at least a range of understanding of what some of those might be.
Some of those tools we'll definitely dive in. They tend to change and they tend to evolve quickly at this point. It's one of those things that just go do some search on AI tools for user feedback, and you'll probably find 10 or 15 that you can start. And again, I've used multiple ones before ending. Okay, there's a bunch of other sort of low-cost experiments, things like landing pages, concierge MVPs, ad campaigns, right? Landing pages tests involve creating a simple web page to gauge interest and collect email signups, right? You can start to gauge that interest in your product. Pages typically include a brief description of the product, its benefits, and some call to action, some activity that the user has to take to show commitment, maybe even sign up for more information. And you can measure interest by tracking the number of signups or other engagement metrics you might get off the page. Helps you determine if there's a decent amount of demand for your product before investing in some of the fuller developments. You can even use A/B testing to compare different versions of your landing page. See which one performs better. You can test different headlines, different images, different calls to action to start to optimize your page for improvement, right? Concierge MVPs. These involve delivering your product or service manually rather than through some sort of an automated system. Allow you to provide a highly personalized experience and almost as importantly, gather detailed feedback from your users in the course of doing that, right? By interacting directly with your users, you can start to understand their needs, preferences, pain points a little bit more, right? Provide sort of invaluable information for refining your product, make sure it meets customer expectations. Now, note, this approach is probably labor intensive and doesn't scale very well, but it provides rich insight and allows you to start to validate your concept without building that full product. Once you've validated the idea, gathered the feedback from those one-on-one interactions, then you can start investing and automating some of the concepts.
Yeah,
right?
you're right. That is definitely not a scalable model. And I can think of several examples. One is there was a company that I heard about. It's probably been at least 7 or 10 years ago. And I believe it was here in Austin, Texas. But what they wanted to do is to create a website for people putting together shopping lists to buy food to be able to pick good recipes that met the needs of their families. And so instead of building and putting all the infrastructure and guessing they knew what families were looking for, they provided that as a service. And so you would call in, talk to a consultant, they'd review your needs, they'd search for recipes, bring them back to you and get your feedback on those. And then they would, and then they would put together your shopping list. And so that was definitely a case of doing the concierge MVP as a way to get validation. I don't remember which way that went in terms of whether they validated it or decided not to move ahead, but definitely a great example of a concierge MVP. And I've even seen in some cases partial ones. So working with the telco company, big part of rolling out a new telco product is all of the integration into the back end systems. Well, if they're just trying to do some MVP testing, I don't want to spend 6 months or a year just doing the back end integrations. And I was like, figure out a way to do those manually. Keep your customer size small. And do that manually until you feel like you validated. Now let's scale it and integrate it in. So you can do that in a partial manner too.
Yeah, I was working with one company. There was a company called Wealthfront that wanted to do automated investment planning and those kind of things. And they hired a bunch of certified financial planners, had them go meet with people, and they got detailed information on how people wanted to plan for their retirement and their investment and those kind of things, and use that to build the actual product. So a lot of insight they got around it was helpful. Another technique you can use is ad campaigns, right? Create sort of targeted online advertising to test market response to your product and service, right? There are things like Google ads, Facebook ads, LinkedIn ads, allow you to reach specific demographics and start to measure engagement, right? You can measure click-through rates to see how many people are interested in your ad, and click on that to learn more. High click-through rate might indicate strong interest, low click-through rate might and suggest a need for adjustment in your messaging or targeting, right? And you can, analyze the ad performance by tracking things like impressions, clicks, conversions, cost per click. Help you understand which of these are effective and figure out how I can then create that product from it. Another way to do some of the early low-cost experimental testing, right? Okay, a couple more real-world examples that highlight the importance of validating product ideas quickly and efficiently, right? By using some simple low-cost test methods, both Dropbox and Airbnb were able to gather valuable insights and ensure there was a decent amount of market demand for the products before they invested heavily in the development of the services you now use, right? Dropbox, great example of rapid validation. Before building the full product, the founders created a simple video demonstrating the core functionality of Dropbox, basically syncing files across devices. They've shared the video on forums, on social media areas to start to gauge interest, to start to gather feedback, right? They got positive response, helped validate the concept, gave them valuable insight, right? They proceeded through, the founders went ahead. They now had confidence that there was some semblance of demand out there. Save time, save resources, made sure there was demand before they gathered, raised a whole bunch of money and invested heavily in development. Airbnb, they started with a simple idea, renting out air mattresses in their apartment to make some extra money. They validated the concept by creating a basic website to list their space and attract guests. They got a whole bunch of bookings really fast, but they used it. They sat down, they gathered feedback from those initial users, right? And they used that feedback to help them iterate on some of their ideas, expand their offerings, right? By validating early at this point, Airbnb was able to refine their business model and grow into the successful platform that it is today. All right, and by learning from some of the failed validation attempts, you can start to improve your strategies, increase your chances of success, right? Again, embracing failure here is a learning opportunity. Continually refining your approach will help you make smarter product decisions. A couple of mistakes that people make here. One is over-reliance on a single method, right? If you rely solely on surveys without conducting user interviews, oftentimes you get incomplete insights. Make sure you're using a combination of methods to make sure you're getting well-rounded understanding. And again, negative feedback. Some people try to avoid the negative feedback. Embrace it, right? It's natural for us to focus on the positives, but oftentimes the negatives can provide valuable insights. And addressing some of those concerns and criticisms can help you fundamentally improve your product, right? Make sure you don't misinterpret data. Ensure that you're accurately analyzing and interpreting the data you collect. Cross-check some of the insights. Validate assumptions. Avoid things like confirmation bias, getting the answers you want, right? And again, embrace failure as a learning opportunity, right? Every failed validation attempt provides valuable lessons that you can inform future efforts out there, right? Instead of viewing failure as a setback, see it as a chance to gain and improve, right? And don't be afraid to iterate, right? Sometimes if you're going down the wrong way, pivot, right? Don't be afraid to pivot based on the feedback, right? If the initial validation attempts don't yield the desired results, you will make changes, try again, right? Be flexible, be adaptable. They're key to successful validation, right? And as I mentioned, a combination of validation methods can help you gather comprehensive insights, right? Use interviews and surveys and feedback with even some of the prototypes that you have out there, right? When the founder of Palm went out and shared his paper block, he got the insight from folks, right? He was doing essentially interviews as he was showing folks out there, right? And be in this node of continuous evaluation and test and refinement. It's an ongoing process, not a one-time event, right? Regularly gather your feedback, analyze the data, make adjustments, ensure your product remains aligned with the user needs, even as you're moving through the process of development. Okay.
Kenny,
Yeah.
along those points,
Yeah.
one is I know that as I've worked with some organizations and I say embrace failure, they're like, failure's a no-no in this organization. And so how do you think you can reframe that in a way that makes that a much more positive way of thinking and to break through that barrier that often exists?
A lot of it is when you get something that doesn't agree with what you thought was going to be, which some people call failure, say, hey, we just learned this really interesting thing, right? Here's what we just learned, right? Don't view it as, hey, only 2% of the people clicked on this, but make sure you have the backup behind it and say, only 2% clicked on it, but here's why, right? If you have an explanation for it, right? It was a key piece. I'll go back to, my Light and Christie example, right? You could say we fundamentally failed when we went to expand that test to those bigger, larger metros. In fact, what I found out in saying, okay, here's what our customers are telling us. They love our product so much, and they love what we put out there, that when we start to take something away, that when we take the skin off the product for them, they don't like that. So that probably shouldn't be part of the communications that we put with this product. We need to find another way to communicate the value of the product. We got a huge learning from that. So when we go change and adjust our product concept, let's make sure we don't focus on taking something away from our customers. So we had valuable learning.
Okay. Andrew had a question also that he put into the chat is, how do you handle the delicate balance between a founder mentality, which ignores naysayers, versus the best practice of requiring external validation? Because you do hear people that you're never going to be successful, but they pushed on and yet they were successful. So where do we find a balance in that?
So they may have pushed on, but they often, the good founders, or the founder mentality of, pushing on, doesn't mean you just go with what you had. You learn from those failures, right? You adjust, you adapt, you change how the product actually is before you put it out there, right? So don't just, bullheaded forward. I know this is right. I'm going to take whatever I put together is right, right? No, you think this is the right idea, and you're going to keep moving forward with it, but you're going to adjust as you go along.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to do is to think about the difference between, there are exceptions to rules. And one of those exceptions to rules is we can be successful without actually doing the market validation. But if you really look at the rules and the companies that are much more successful overall, applying those rules or guidelines, they're going to increases your chances of success. So instead of betting on being an exception, let's bet on doing what we know is best practice.
Yeah, think back to a lot of those companies back in the early 2000s that thought they had great web ideas and just went with them and spent tons of money around it, and they failed as a result thereof. They didn't listen to some of the feedback they were getting from folks. So better to listen to the feedback. All right, let's do one more poll here, Tom. All right.
Okay.
While you're likely needing to use multiple techniques, which rapid validation technique we talked about do you feel would be easiest or most effective to implement immediately within your current workflow? Getting lots of answers here. That's good.
Yeah, there's definitely a couple of those that I think would take a significant initial effort to be able to get to, but I think those are being highlighted in that way.
So concierge MVPs is tough, right?
Yeah.
Right. But I think the early ones that I would use, and it looks like we can share the results, right? Would be user interviews and paper prototypes. And Tom, I don't know about you, but I often use those in combination, right? Create something that users can respond to, right? Make sure you understand their needs. I wouldn't start with the paper prototype, but talk to users a lot about, the space that you're working in, what their needs are, what their requirements are, what their challenges are, and then sort of bring out a paper prototype, share it with them, and say, okay, how does this match with some of the needs that you've had? Excellent. So that's a key one. Yeah, I was when I was doing some work with Amazon way back when, and we were creating digital versions of textbooks for college students. We weren't selling quite as many as we wanted to, so we went out and talked to a bunch of college students about some of their needs. Turns out they're really bad at time management. Turns out we actually had a decent asset because we were creating their textbooks and we knew what their syllabi were. So we figured we could create a decent schedule for them. So I just created a paper prototype of some schedules, went out and met with a whole bunch of college students, right? And suddenly got huge feedback on what we should include, what we shouldn't include, right? Just based on putting out a schedule for some of these college students around there. So a combination of user interviews and essentially a paper prototype. We didn't build the product, right? I knew I could do some things with the assets we had around the syllabi, use those to basically prototype a bunch of schedules for students. Had a huge impact, right? We were able to evolve the product as a result thereof. Okay, a couple of key takeaways. You'll never have enough information to make a fully informed decision. So embrace it, right? Here's a couple of key points from the last 30 minutes that I hope you take away with you. One, understand traditional validation methods. They're slow, they're expensive, right? Don't wait for that full product launch. That's going to be slow. It's going to be costly. Increase your risk of failure, waste resources. By the time you launch, the market may have shifted, or you may find that your product doesn't meet customer needs, right? It's crucial to recognize the limitations of some of these techniques. Find faster, more efficient alternatives. And again, shift your mindset, right? To succeed in today's fast-paced environment, we need to shift that mindset from building to learning. Instead of investing heavily in development upfront, focus on gathering insights quickly and cheaply. Use some of the rapid validation techniques we've talked about, things like prototypes, user interviews, even AI-assisted validation to test your ideas before you make some of these significant investments, right? And next, embrace failure, learn and adapt, right? Failure is an inevitable part of this validation process. Becomes a valuable learning opportunity, right? Embrace this failure as a chance to gain insights and improve your product and offerings. Analyze what went wrong, adjust your strategies, iterate based on that feedback, right? And by learning from failure and continue to refine your approach, you can hopefully increase your chance of success and create products that hopefully truly create value for and meet user needs.
All right. Well, Kenny, thank you. We do have a few questions, but let's talk about these special offers first, and then go into the several questions that have come up. So first of all, we have our AI product management class coming up, and there's an opportunity for you to be able to participate in that for a discount of $1,000. This really helps you answer that question of, how do I leverage AI for my product? How do I use it in the best way? Because too often we're asked, do AI because it's the buzzword, but not really having a good framework on how to address it. So that is one promotion that is good until the end of April. Let's go on to the next one.
Yeah.
All right. This one is still the AI class, but this is a chance to get a free seat. So different offer, but the same class. So using that QR code, you can try to get that free seat. And then last one coming up is we do have another webinar coming up. And this one is going to be with Dean Peters. We're going to take some of these concepts that we talked about today and really focus on storyboarding as a way of getting feedback, but also being able to explain new concepts both internally and externally. And I'm going to be hosting that along with Dean. So remember those? Why don't we go and look at our Q&A? Oh, no.
Let's start. We got a couple more.
Yeah, we got these courses coming up. And all of those, 10% off from those. So we have an AI course coming up the end of March and another one in April. So those have the very special offers associated to them. And then our standard optimal product management class coming up also soon here in March, and then again in April, and a digital product management class scheduled for April. So keep those in mind and take advantage of these courses, live courses, or you can also take advantage of these self-study courses.
And for the live courses, don't forget you can use this 10%. Oh no, you can save 10% on all the self-study courses.
Sorry, yeah, that 10% is for the self-study courses.
Perfect, excellent. All right.
So we got some questions here. First one is, how good are virtual users in your experience? Do they totally eliminate the need for real users?
I would do a little bit of both. I think AI is still at the point that use it for insight, use it for that first cut. But again, to the point of using multiple validation techniques, I'd start there and actually start to test with real users before just making a call on some of the virtual users. What do you think?
No, I agree with you. Anything that I do in AI is I always used it as a first draft. Or first line of understanding to give me some framework. I think it's going to help you pick out these things aren't valuable or these have the potential to be highly valuable, but I would always still go to a real user. So,
yeah.
All right. In terms of quick, we talk about doing quick validation. How long is quick? And I know sometimes we talk about it in terms of hours or days, but I know that's not always realistic. So what do you think? It's no
Part of it's
longer.
part of it's going to depend on how long your product cycle is and what you need to, but you should try to, you should try to have some technique that will give you learning within a couple of weeks. Right?
Yeah.
And you should try to spend, right? If it's going to take several months to get your insight, find a way to get that insight faster. Right? Maybe there's a technique that'll allow you to get there, but you should have something, I would say, within a couple of weeks to at least be able to make some calls on it.
Yeah, no, that's the same way I think is. I think within 2 weeks ought to be a really good target. And I think if you find that your experiment's going to take a lot longer, I think, this goes back to the Zappos example. What was their biggest uncertainty? So you may be trying to test too much within that. And so break it down into a smaller test of saying, out of what I'm testing, what's really my most important and my biggest uncertainty? And I think in many cases, you're going to be able to get that down, within that 2-week period. The other part is, you do not expect you're going to reach 100% confidence level in any of these tests. No. This is, any amount of testing that we're going to do is give us a better sense of an answer. So,
a lot of it is
perfection.
And back to that point, Tom, right, is that you're going to have some point that's going to say, I feel confident enough to go, right? That doesn't mean stop testing, right? Keep going, because to your point, you may not have the right answer yet, right? You're going to continue to evolve throughout the development process. There's some point at which you say, okay, I feel comfortable enough to go, right? So you're going to press that button and increase the resources that you put behind it, but don't stop your learning, right? Even while you're building, don't stop your learning. Keep going. Keep learning, right? To evolve.
All right. Another question here. How do you select and prioritize the features in a prototype or a prototype?
Yeah, I think Tom, you mentioned that when we talk about Zappos, right? What are the big things that are high risk for me, right? What do I think about this, right? In the Zappos instances, it was, how do I test for, will people actually buy shoes online, right? I don't need to care about supply chain. I don't need to care about inventory. I don't need to care. That's not what I'm testing here, right? So we're going to pull that out of the test. What I want to find out is there demand for people to buy shoes online? So focus based on what the user insight is, right? Around what's the value there, and or what's my biggest risk, and make sure you include those in your prototype. Make sure you can test those, and at the end of the test, say, okay, I've got confidence, or at least some confidence, that that's validated.
All right, excellent, thank you. Let's see here. How much would you recommend spending on validation testing?
Again, that's going to depend largely on what it's going to take, do an estimate on what it's going to take to develop it, right? So if it's big investment, then you may want to spend more on the validation, right? Right. Let me go back to my KFC example, right? It was going to be a huge investment for us to go national with that, with our light and crispy product. So our early tests, our market tests, they weren't cheap. We spent some money behind them, right? We probably spent, a couple $100,000 on creating the commercial and editing out the commercial for one specific test market and setting up the stores to do it. But we knew the risk and the expense of going national was huge, right? So we spent a lot more on that test. Whereas other tests I've done where it was just putting something out there, you'd spend tens of dollars on it. When I did the test with students at Amazon, that was hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Is it really kind of looks at what is that level of investment? And I don't know whether the answer is 10% or something less than that. I probably wouldn't spend over 10% of what that total cost would be, but somewhere around that or less, I think is a fair expectation.
For sure.
Another question. Have you ever had scenarios where the idea getting validated got a mixed bag of feedback? How did you pivot from there? It sounds like the KFC example had a little bit of that, but do you have some other examples?
Yeah, and a lot of it, if you're getting a truly mixed bag, right, that's a good opportunity to stop, right? Rethink, right? And you're clearly not in a go scenario, and it might you might need to dig deeper in the analysis, right? Who are the folks giving you the positive response? What is it about the product that's resonating with them? You might have to come up with a more focused offering that targets those people who gave you a positive response. Incorporate some of that negative feedback. Maybe those are things that you can actually fix and go retry it from those folks. Right. So it's either targeting or pivoting and evolving what you created out there. And you may have to go retest it, right? You're not doing this just once and fly and say, okay, we're done, right? It may take multiple shots to get it out there.
Mhm. I think you kind of implied this, but part of that pivot may be there's a different target audience I need to be going to, is where, okay, if I do my segmentation around those, what the feedback I'm getting, that may help me better figure out who my target market needs to be.
Yep, for sure. Other questions?
Well, this goes back to someone said earlier is, well, I think there were two aspects of it. Is one is there's not a lot of support for doing this type of validation testing. And I think when you did the first survey, one of the answers that wasn't the highest, but wasn't one of the highest, was I can't get support internally to do this. So how do I convince my CEO or, my executive team that this is the right thing for us to do?
So one of the things I've done around this, I told you I had that challenge when I was at KFC that folks just wanted to launch. Hey, we got a great idea. Let's go with it. Go detail how much they're actually going to have to spend to get it out there and what the risk of failure is going to cost. Right? Lay that out there when they see the hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars that's going to take. And then you say, if we spent a couple hundred or a couple $1,000 here to validate and figure out what we're doing, we wouldn't risk those millions of dollars that we're going to spending to launch this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's helped a lot, right? I told you that, when I had to go convince my CEO not to launch based on what we found out in East Lansing, I said, here's what the cost is going to look like. Here's what a national campaign around this product is going to look like. And said, here's what an expanded test is going to cost us. It's not going to be cheap, but versus what it might be for failure in the other end, we have the opportunity there.
All right. I know that we're right at the end of time. There's one more question. And so we'll stay on and answer this. And if you can stay on, please do. But if you need to drop off, we sure understand. I have a situation where stakeholders don't want to invest on any product management lifecycle phases. How can I get them onboarded? They directly want to build stuff and want product to run the go-to-market. I suppose that's a little bit related to what we're talking about,
It
but maybe
certainly
a
is.
different angle.
Yeah, if you can try to convince those folks of what development and launch costs, and what the risk of failure is going to be, or recant some of the stories of product failures in the past, right? And we've got data that says somewhere between 70 and 90% of product launches fail, right? Do you want to be in that 70 or 90% club, or would you rather learn from that and have more successful pieces, so that, again, you're not just running the go-to-market, you're helping that development team build not just stuff, but the right stuff.
Yeah.
Even better stead.
All right. Well, I think we'll wrap up there. Remember the offers here and the discount codes for the AI product management classes that we talked about and the free offer, and also some of the upcoming courses. And of course, there's a discount for the self-study. So thank you so much for joining us today. And we look forward to engaging with you in the future and hopefully seeing you in some of our upcoming classes.
All right.
So,
thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful day. Enjoy.